So for all my years of playing Soulsborne and watching I don't know how many ranking videos, I decided to do my own. There are so many great bosses in Bloodborne, and this is my 2 cents on how I rank all of the great encounters in this absolutely phenomenal masterpiece of a game. And absolutely dead last is Micolash. I really, really don't like having to fight Micolash. Now, if I start a new run of Bloodborne, I look forward to everything. I look forward to every environment. I look forward to every enemy. I look forward to every boss encounter. I look forward to just playing Bloodborne. However, one thing that I absolutely do not look forward to, the only thing, is having to actually fight Micolash. I love the lore, I love the design of Micolash, I like the puppets, I like the arena, it's atmospheric, it's all great, except for the way that you actually have to fight him. It breaks up the pace of the game for me, and it just becomes, well, at times, it becomes very tedious and just frustrating if he's running around like a little bitch. And if you want to use the poison darts to cheese Micolash in the second phase, you get no judgment from me. You go right ahead. He probably deserves it for running around like a little dick all the time. So yeah, Micolash is by no means my least favorite boss in all of Souls. Not by a damn shot. But in this game, in Bloodborne, certainly the one thing that I never look forward to. And it's never going to change. I don't think. Micolash, I think, is pretty much always going to be at the bottom of the list for me. So, Micolash, absolutely dead fucking last. Dropping in at the second to last spot, the Witches. I actually don't mind the Witches. I kind of like this fight. I think it's pretty cool. I like the atmosphere. I like the vibe. I like some of the mechanics. I think it's cool that if you have any insight, you get extra enemies. They don't do anything. They're not really like a threat, to be honest. They just sort of walk around and don't do shit. I like the fact that if you get this first witch down to around half health, the second witch spawns in secretly, and you can go kill that second witch first, so that the first witch doesn't get resurrected once you kill her. I think it's pretty cool. I don't have a problem with it. It is a boss that I look forward to dealing with it if I'm doing an all-boss run. I certainly love running hemwick Lane. It's one of my favorite areas in the game. So that's, I mean, the witches, they're cool. They're just fine. You know, certainly not my favorite boss in Bloodborne, but I don't think that they're offensively bad by any means. They're cool. Paarl is a boss that I struggled with when I first started playing Bloodborne. I think you'll see I don't really struggle much with her anymore. I do Paarl really early in the game, before Amelia, just to get her out of the way. Paarl is fine. The design is cool. I have fun kind of fighting her. Paarl is fine. Paarl is a cool boss, but I think is pretty much always going to come up near the bottom of my ranking, I think. But I have fun demolishing Paarl pretty quick. I have fun fighting Celestial Emissary for the brief time that I actually get to fight Celestial Emissary. It's Living Failure's light, shall we say. So once you know that you can use a Beast Blood pellet and go to town on the tiny little aliens here and build it up, by the time you actually go to attack the big Celestial Emissary, the actual boss, it's kind of trivial. But I've always thought it was really cool and atmospheric, and I liked seeing the little blue people get more love in the game. So, I don't know. I like Celestial Emissary. I think it's pretty cool. Next, we got Wet Nurse. I really love Wet Nurse. Visually, it's horrifying. I'm not the biggest fan of the Nightmare phase. It's kind of clumsy, but other than that, I love it. The biggest problem that I have with Wet Nurse is my own It's my own fucking fault. I don't level vitality. I might start dropping points into it maybe around Gehrman or Ludwig, but typically I don't. So right here I'm still at base vitality and using beast blood pellets, which means that it is very easy to get fucked up. But that's my fault. At this stage, like trying to rank bosses around Witners starts to get a little tricky because I think that they're all fucking incredible after this. But maybe out of the ones that are left, Witners is the one that I look forward to the least, but I still think that it's incredible. Over time, I have had to learn to love the shadows. If I had made this ranking years ago, the shadows probably absolutely would have been dead fucking last, probably without question. I fucking hated them. But once I learned how to deal with them, I actually started to have a lot of fun balancing these three different types of play. And someone out there might disagree with me, but I think that they're a perfect evolution of Ornstein and Smo. Ornstein and Smo were a perfect dual boss fight. They complemented each other very well, and I think the three shadows complement each other very well, and you're able to manage and balance them really effectively. The one problem that I do have with the shadows is the one-hit bullshit snake fight. The snake thing that they conjure up out of the ground if you let the fight go on long enough. I don't like that. I think it's really unnecessary, and it takes away from the elegance of juggling these three great enemies. And again, my own stupid fault for doing this at base vitality all the time, but whatever. The one cool thing if you are struggling with the shadows, and this has been noted before, is to exploit the AI here with this last one. But I don't know. I really like the shadows these days. I think that they're cool, but certainly I think that they're better bosses to come in Bloodborne. I really, really love the intro to the One Reborn, the sound design, the way that it screams, the look of the moon. All of that is really cool and really sets a great tone for the boss, and I think it's a very interesting and imaginative adaptation, I guess, of Tower Knight, where you have this giant boss and then you have enemies on either side of the arena and throwing shit down at you. Now, the One Reborn is not without any shortage of limbs, and once you understand limb breaking and beast blood pellets and all that in Bloodborne, you can really trivialize this entire encounter. That said, I have a lot of fun fighting the One Reborn. I always look forward to running Yharnam to get to it. And if you don't trivialize it, I still think that it's a really cool design, and I think this is a really good placement for a really great boss. So maybe a hot take, but Laurence. Now look, I've changed my mind about Laurence over the years. I have grown. I have changed my opinion. Laurence used to be the thing that I hated most about Bloodborne, but I've changed. I think that Laurence is an exceptionally well-designed boss. I love the moveset, the look, the lore, all of it. I think Laurence is fantastic. I like the idea of taking the Cleric Beast, who is arguably one of the easiest bosses in the game, and then bringing that boss design back later to make one of the most imposing and threatening bosses in the game. I think that's fucking incredible. What I do not like about Laurence is not Laurence. It's the arena in which you fight him. I think it's too small and it takes away from the overall experience. It's kind of like the Capra Demon effect, although not nearly as offensive as Capra Demon from Dark Souls. It's just so small to me, and the AoEs are so strong and so powerful that I feel like you never really get the full experience of being able to deal with Laurence. Now, that's just my opinion. And to be fair, I do think that Laurence can be a very, very fun boss to fight. I do have fun dealing with Laurence. It doesn't put me off from wanting to do the DLC. It's just the arena, I think, is a bit too small. But other than that, Laurence is cool. Rom is a boss that I love more for the lore and the arena than I do for the actual fighting of her. But that said, I do think that it's a well-designed boss. I really do. I think the little spiders and her attacks are visually, they look really cool. I don't think that it's unfair or imbalanced in any way. If I had any complaint, it's that it can drag on for a while if you don't do what I'm about to do here, and I fuck up my stamina management which is how she's able to avoid getting jacked up in this first phase. But she has AoE attacks, and she doesn't give you a lot of windows for opportunity to get in there and fuck her up if you play this out the way it's designed. But it's hard to complain about that necessarily, because I think that it is so well designed and so well balanced. So I don't know. Rom is really cool no matter how you decide to fight her, and I think it's a really well designed boss. Amelia will always be a little special to me. I remember my first run of Bloodborne, discovering Amelia and her change and the presentation of the boss. I think Amelia visually is one of the best bosses in Bloodborne. I love the design and the aesthetics of this boss. I will say that the first time I fought Amelia, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I sucked real bad. And I knew about limb breaks from Cleric Beast, sort of, kinda. I knew you could do extra damage to limbs, but I didn't know about limb breaking, you know. I didn't know that you could do a lot of damage to get a stagger and then a visceral or anything like that. So Amelia was the boss that taught me really how to play Bloodborne. So she'll always have just a special place for me because of that. But I do think that overall, her mechanics, her phases, her design, I think all of that is great. Not the hardest boss by any means, but I don't know. Maybe she doesn't really need to be. What to say about Amygdala? How do I talk about Amygdala? Okay. So the design of Amygdala is one of my favorites in Bloodborne. I love the overall look of Amy. Her moveset is varied and erratic. She hits very hard, but it's balanced out by being able to break her limbs and smack her fucking head to get a visceral attack. All of that is great. What frustrates me Amygdala is that she's so present throughout the course of Bloodborne, from little Amy statues in Grand Cathedral to the Amy in Cathedral Ward, the Amy in Yahar'gul, the Amy that takes you to the lecture hall. She's such a presence throughout the game, and when you walk into the arena in Nightmare Frontier, she just sort of jumps down like, hey. And I guess I just wanted something a bit more epic and a bit more dramatic. I guess I just expected her to be, I don't know, just more epic. That said, I do like Amygdala, and when you find her in the Chalice dungeons, she does give you something a bit more epic, I'll say. Shit on me all you want to. I don't care. I love Cleric Beast. I don't give a shit. I love the intro that Cleric Beast makes. I love that you hear Cleric Beast earlier on when you first leave the clinic and you're going up the ladder. I love it. I love it as a tutorial boss on limb breaks and dealing with giant beast enemies. I save Cleric Beast for the end of the game, and I completely fuck it up. That's okay. I have fun doing that. But no, I love Cleric Beast, and I think it's well deserving of a spot high up on the list of best bosses in Bloodborne. So depending on the pathing that you choose in Bloodborne will sort of determine how perfectly placed she is in your run. I do Bloodstar Beast very early to open up a path to Amelia and Upper Cathedral Ward, because I don't do Cleric Beast. And you have to do one or the other to progress the game. They're both not optional. You have to do one or the other, and I always choose Bloodstar Beast. And the design is something that I've always appreciated as uniquely and incredibly grotesque. Not really something that we'd seen in Souls before, which makes her stand out as really unique, really cool. I love how she's just sort of sitting at the back of this church, just waiting for you when you walk in. It was always very imposing. I like the poison mechanic that elevates her threat. And if you do get poisoned, you have to balance healing and using antidotes while trying to fight her. So, yeah, I've always appreciated Bloodstar Beast and really solid mechanics. The boss sitting atop, probably my favorite area in Bloodborne. Castle Cainhurst, I think, is an incredibly atmospheric and moody place in Bloodborne, which is already an incredibly atmospheric and moody game. So I think Logarius is interesting insofar as if he wants to just sit around and spam magic the whole time, it can get just a little frustrating. But I think that it is balanced out because in his first phase, he does offer melee attacks that open up parry windows to get viscerals, and I am trying so hard throughout this first phase to get behind him to do a charged R2 to get a visceral, and I promise it can be done. I promise. Don't look at my failures here as being indicative of it not being possible. I promise it's possible. I just suck right here. I'm not doing a very good job at fighting Logarius. Okay. But here, I mean, he does open himself up to parries, and in the short to mid range in this first phase with his magic, he will punish the shit out of you if you're just trying to rush in and you don't manage your greed, which I'm not very good at that sometimes. The second phase gets a bit more complicated, I think, specifically just because of the sword that he puts in the ground that causes the little, the flying swords. I think that almost feels like it's just maybe a bit much because of everything else going on. But as an in-game boss, as an incredibly atmospheric, well-designed boss, I think Logarius is perfect in this spot, and certainly a boss that I look forward to fighting every run. Every time I fight Gehrman, I am reminded of the boss fight in Metal Gear Solid 3, which, if you haven't played Metal Gear Solid 3, please go play Metal Gear Solid 3. It's fucking incredible. Gehrman is such a perfectly designed fight that tests you on everything that you've learned up to that point, which is what a great final boss in Souls does, I think. The only boss that I can think of that does it better is Sword Saint in Sekiro. I'm not going to talk about Sword Saint or anything like that, but the Sword Saint, probably the best fight they've ever designed, I think. But anyway, another cool thing about Gehrman is the lore. And, I mean, not just the lore in the vanilla game and how it's presented, but also with the way that it is enhanced by the DLC as well. Once you know the connections of the DLC with Maria and Gehrman, it just makes it even better. And I've always appreciated that, how not only is it a great boss fight in the game in every way, but that it is enhanced, it is made even better with the inclusion of the DLC once you play it. So it just gets better, I think. And I always have a good time fighting Gehrman. I love his multiple phases. The one complaint that I guess I could have is that he is very easy to parry once you kind of get a feel for it, and I'm certainly not perfect by any means. I get fucked up quite a few times here. But he is pretty easy to parry, but that aside, it's hard to find any real fault or really good complaint against Gehrman. It's so well designed, and it's a great ending and a great test of everything that you've learned throughout the entire Bloodborne experience. When I think about Bloodborne and Bloodborne bosses, Gascoigne is one of the first ones that I think about, and I can't imagine this being designed more perfectly than it is as an opening boss. So when you run the first area of Bloodborne, Central Yharnam, you're introduced to two tutorial bosses. Now, Cleric is here to teach you about limb breaks, and Gascoigne is here to teach you about parries. But I think it's so much more than that. Gascoigne introduces you to dealing with other hunters, multi-phase bosses. He has 3 phases. So it's not just parries, but it's also not just game mechanics. I think Gascoigne really introduces us in many ways to the type and kind and quality of horror that we're in for, especially if you read about the music box and his family, the impact of the blood. I can't imagine it being better than it is, and forgive the jank-ass way that I deal with Gascoigne here. But yeah, I think Gascoigne is up there in some of the best bosses, not just in Bloodborne, but in all of Souls. These rankings are incredibly subjective, but will you look at this? You look at it, just look at it and see it. It's so beautiful. I love this whole design. I don't want to have to go fight Ebrietas. It reminds me of Sif. There's something so tragic about Daughter of the Cosmos. I don't want to go fuck you up. I don't want to, but I'm going to. To me, as far as like the cosmic, like the alien-ish, the greater ones bosses go in Bloodborne, I don't think that there are any as visually stunning as Ebrietas, and that includes Moon Presence. But I'll talk more about Moon Presence later. I think Ebrietas is beautiful. Now, as far as her mechanics go as a boss, if you know that you can rush in and start breaking her limbs and get her for a visceral and then wait for a phase change and fuck her up more, Ebrietas is not a very difficult boss, but if you do let it go on and she starts using a Call Beyond and all that, it can be an imposing boss, but that's not why she ranks so high for me. It's the lore, and it is her design and the arena. I always look forward to encountering Ebrietas, and I think for me, it's one of my favorites in the game. The first time fighting Ludwig in the DLC on New Game 4 was a bit of a challenge, shall we say. Ludwig can be kind of difficult. But it is not the challenge for me that elevates Ludwig to such a high position on this ranking. I mean, I certainly think that his moveset is great. Don't get me wrong, but really, I mean, oddly enough, it's the voice acting and how it contributes to the mood. It is absolutely the score. And really, it's that second phase change with the Moonlight Sword, and that it's such a cool callback to other Souls games, and the way that it's presented, so atmospheric, it's so cool, that it's really difficult not to put Ludwig so high on the list. Now, if I have any videos on this jank-ass channel that ever gained any mild attention, it's this video I put up years ago beating Ludwig in like 30-ish seconds. Now, clearly, I'm not trying to do that here, but it does go relatively quickly. So I'll do something a little different for this ranking and look at the fight and offer maybe a tip or two. So when you first enter the arena, Ludwig will always lunge at you. So dodge, R1, L1, R1. So I use Beast Blood Pellets and Fire Paper. And here, I think we break his limbs. Yeah. So Beast Blood Pellets, Fire Paper, the two 18% gems that you get in Yahar'gul and Mensis, and 2 Claw Mark runes to increase visceral damage, right? If you're breaking his limbs, and if you're continuing to build your beast meter, you're doing increased damage, right? Now, I don't like to put a lot of distance between myself and Ludwig because he might do his rush or his spray, so I like to stay on him. And here, I always like to rush in because I don't want him to do his waves with the Moonlight Sword. I want to try and get a melee attack that is easy to dodge, and your Beast Blood meter is high, so you're doing a lot of damage. Should be able to get a really quick stagger and a visceral, and then run in and clean him up. It's hard not to put Ludwig at the top of a Bloodborne boss ranking, or one of the best Souls bosses that they've ever made. If this was a ranking about the best boss intros in all of Souls, this would without question be my number one. I love it. It is dripping in atmosphere and vibe and mood, and has come to be the thing that sort of symbolizes my feelings and thoughts about Bloodborne. If somebody came to me and they said, hey, give me an image or a quick video that sort of tells me about Bloodborne, this is what I would give them. I can't. I love it. Now, as a boss, it might be a bit of a hot take to have her so high on this list, but fuck it, it's my list. It's my subjective take on all this. Moon Presence is not necessarily a difficult boss. I mean, I still died to her. I died in this run. She did one of her jumps and landed on me, and that's about it. But to be fair, I am running this at base vitality. I think at this point I might have dumped a point into it just to get rid of some blood echoes, but I'm somewhere between 10 and 11, maybe 12, so still really low. But she's not a difficult boss, especially if you know about limb breaks and how to get the riposte out of her after enough damage. But yeah, I love Moon Presence. I make no apologies. I don't care. I love this boss. And if you still have things to do after beating Moon Presence, other bosses left to clean up, or the DLC, always make sure that you Hunter's Mark out here. to avoid being pushed into New Game Plus. Of all that we've experienced, of all that we've been through, of all that we've seen throughout the course of Bloodborne, to travel through the hunter's nightmare, to get to the end, to make it to the shore, to see Orphan crawling from his dead mother's womb, looking pathetic, tragic, sad, standing up weakly to look out over the sea, and we hear this melancholic wailing, this moaning. How is this not perfect? This is masterfully done, I think, to evoke such horror and emotion in a minute-ish, under a minute. I think is incredible in the way that it sets the vibe for what's about to happen. I think, just, what can you say? Great job. But then you get into the actual fight of Orphan. Orphan is difficult. I think Orphan has a steep learning curve. In the first phase, he opens himself quite often to charged R2s and viscerals, so not unmanageable, not unlearnable. And now, if somebody came to me and they said, Orphan's the best boss in Bloodborne, I'd be like, well, I know it's all subjective, but hell, I mean, I get it. Yeah, okay, can't argue that. Orphan, I think Orphan is top 5 of all the Soulsborne bosses, Orphan's incredible. I could see somebody making the case that maybe Orphan is a bit too difficult, especially in the second phase where you go absolutely insane, like he's about to here. But there's one boss in Bloodborne, just one, that is just a smidge, just a tiny bit better to me, that steps over Orphan just a little bit to take that top spot. I will never forget the first time I fought Maria. When it was over, I remember thinking to myself, well, fuck me. This is the best boss that FromSoft has ever designed. And to this day, I go forth and back with myself, like whether or not she's better than Sword Saint. But without question, for me, she is absolutely the best boss in all of Bloodborne. Her design, the arena, the lore, all of it to me is absolutely incredible, top tier. I love the way that it builds from her blood attacks to the fire attacks. It's so dramatic, the way that everything climbs and just becomes more threatening. I love it. I can't imagine this is ever going to change for me. And even though I know how to deal with her easily now, I will do an entire run of Bloodborne just to fight Maria. I love everything about it. Don't see it changing. Best boss in all of Bloodborne. It has been such a great and fun experience putting this all together, talking about all the bosses in one of my favorite games of all time. I'm looking forward to doing this with the other Souls games. Maybe not Elden Ring. I don't know about Elden Ring. Whatever. At the end of the day, though, I mean, ranking aside, I love everything about Bloodborne. Really, I do. But I'm curious. If you had to make your own ranking, what would you say are your top 5 best bosses in all of Souls?